everybody. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Japan by River Cruise. I'm Bobby Judo, joining you from Fukuoka.
And I'm Ollie Horn, calling you from Jakarta. You heard.
Jakarta. You are going all over the place. We've got another great episode lined up for you today. We're going to be talking some typhoon news. What are the correct kanji for hagibis? Also, social media stalking taken to the next level. Plus, as always, Ollie has your recommended river cruise for the week. Ollie?
Yes, this week I'm recommending a nostalgic river cruise down the Shimanto-gawa that allows passengers to experience life as it was in ancient Japan, a time before mobile phones, a time before cars, and a time before the invention of the commercial river cruise. So authentic is the experience, they reportedly don't have a boat.
And something we're particularly proud of, I'll tell you how this very podcast is spearheading the campaign to get the Yanagawa River Cruise registered as a World Heritage Site. If you'd like to get involved, all you have to do is help us raise the $5 million for the dude at UNESCO. But first, Soap Talk. So, Ollie, how's your week been?
Yeah, it's been good. Got here to Jakarta 2 days ago. Was due to do 2 shows, and then the promoter said, "Hey, since you arrive on the Thursday, why don't we add an extra bar show? It's just a bit of fun at an Irish pub." And I am reportedly the first comedian ever in Jakarta to have to pull a show because no one turned up, not even the ticket holders.
Oh, wow. And this is a bar show?
Yeah, well, this is in an Irish pub.
Was there even anybody in just to drink at the bar?
No, not really.
Like if you're not a comedian, you might not know this, but like a bar show is like just a show that you do at a bar, and most of the time it can be a little bit more challenging than a regular show because the bar is full of people who are just there because it's a bar.
Yeah, this was full of people that weren't there because I was there. It was basically the way that I found out this city works is traffic in Jakarta is mental. I mean, it's absolutely mental. A journey of a kilometer can take up to an hour because the cars just don't move, and it's mainly that when it rains, which it happened last night, everything just grounds to a complete halt. What happens is that all the motorcyclists, of which there are loads, they all park their vehicles under bridges, which makes like the roads even smaller. And yeah, I mean, this city's just not set up for all the people that have a car. And so it was very funny. There was a bit of a Facebook hoo-ha about 3 or 4 weeks ago. A comedian called Freddie Quinn, who's a British act, who's very good, and I hosted his shows while he was doing them in Malaysia. And he did this run of shows this time last month.
Yeah.
He posted on Facebook that as kind of a little kind of proud boast, that he'd heard that he was the first foreign comedian to headline a show in Jakarta.
Yeah.
Now he'd misquoted what he'd actually heard from the promoter, which is he was the first comedian to headline a show in a purpose-built comedy club, because last month they just built their first full-time club.
Before the shows in a lot of places where like the scenes are just getting off the ground. In Japan, they've got like dedicated Japanese comedy theaters, but they still don't have like a dedicated English language comedy club.
Right, and Indonesia doesn't have dedicated comedy spaces either. It's like stand-up just was not a thing. Anyway, but he posted this on Facebook, and what happened was a load of boring old comics came out the woodwork going, actually, I think you'll find I did a show in Jakarta 15 years ago. I think it was, and just not able to either let him have his moment, and so then the promoter, who's been out here for 20 years, right? He's seen it all. Commented on this post which Freddie put, which said, "Hey, I was the first comedian," and he was like, "Well, actually, he was the first foreign comedian to headline a club, but fair enough." And so what I did last night was I posted that I'd also set a record. Jokes on Freddie. I'm the first foreign comedian to have a gig cancelled. And the promoter was kind to point out that that's true. There's no caveats needed.
I think I like that in the background of the picture that you posted when you mentioned that on Facebook, there's like a big Guinness sign in the background, and I don't know if that was intentional, like a Guinness World Record kind of like I'm the record holder.
It wasn't. That's funny though. Well, actually, I mean, the show was weird as it was because it was in this kind of back room of a pub, and he said, look, you've got a choice of where you perform. You either perform on the stage, which is ages away, like so far away from where the people are going to sit, or you perform on the floor, which is weird because people are sitting on high tables.
Right.
Or you perform, the third option was, there's like a really, really long table that kind of runs from the stage to the main seating area, and that's used for podium dancing. You could do it on that.
Yeah.
And all three seemed rubbish. So the compromise that they come up with is the steps that go up to the podium from the table side, not from the stage side, that's just the right height. So already at my sound check, I was standing on a step thinking, well, this could go well if the stars align. So maybe it was a blessing.
Take you back to your days at CC Cafe, standing on like a wooden box.
Well, exactly. Well, I mean, but that's true even of M8. So when we moved the shows, in for Corker to a dedicated venue, and the guy who runs it was like, hey, I want to make sure it's a really great club. Tell me anything you need, curtains or a stage or lighting, and I'll buy it. I want to make it good. And he calls me up. He's like, Ollie, I need you to come round because I need you to check the height of the stage.
Yeah.
I went, right, okay, what do you think? He went, well, I'm thinking about the height of a beer crate. I was like, oh, that's quite specific. Why do you say that? He went, it will be made of beer crates. But anyway, in the end, the guy wasn't that bothered. But this is what I found out. In order for me to do that show, right, we had to get documentation. It cost him, I think, $300 or something in order for me to have the right visa. Because Indonesia is a country that likes corruption. And this promoter, has been stung before where comics haven't been on the right visa, and he's had to like pay bribes of like $2,000 or $3,000 to get comics out of trouble. So I had a legit, like a proper performer's visa. They don't have a category for comedian, so I was a musician according to my documentation, and and like there was like he had to inform the police of my visit. Like an immigration official could have come and inspected. There was about 6 or 7 different PDF documents that he sent to me with all stuff that was done, just bureaucracy. And like I really hope to
imagine like you guys have to like work out a special secret signal, so like in case the inspector shows up, like he flashes you a high sign and you just start singing "I am the very model of a modern major general." Like, it's a musical performance.
But thank goodness. I mean, imagine if they turned up to inspect, which they were absolutely entitled to do. Right. They just go, hang on, you paid all this for this? No one's here. But thankfully, the show which I did last night, which was in their dedicated club, did go well. Yeah. It was absolutely full of people who didn't really have the English ability to enjoy live stand-up comedy, but that didn't stop me trying my absolute best for 70 minutes. I did 70 minutes to a crowd which didn't understand me. I'm a hero.
That seems really contradictory to me because you said you tried your absolute best, and from what I know, your absolute best is like 5 minutes of material.
Good. Right. Do we have any post?
Yeah, actually we did. We've got another 2 weeks in a row. We have 2 messages. First, the first Brian that we've got a message from is a Brian. And he says, I enjoyed the most recent episode. It was nice to hear Bobby.
Sorry, Bobby. Do we know that this is you say Brian, he said. If we're taking Brian as our listenership, we're going to have to use a gender-neutral term.
Okay, so this Brian is named Brian, and they said, I enjoyed the most recent episode. It was nice to hear Bobby cut Ollie some slack for butchering his Japanese pronunciation. After all, Ollie is British, and the British are famous for butchering their own language. Buzzing! I added the buzzing there. Yeah.
Okay, Brian. Thanks for that. Not sure where you're from, but I'm sure it sucks. Next.
Next is one we've got. This Brian is called Matthias or something. It says, "Hey, awesome podcast. Reminds me of my time in Fukuoka. Want to go back and see you guys in another comedy gig at Mate, or as Ollie calls it, M8 because he butchers language. And there's a PS. It says, I don't recommend the quote-unquote river cruise from Northern Africa to Italy. Heard it is often wet and cramped. Okay, so hold on a second here, because I want to just make sure that we're all on the same page. I think that what Matthias here is saying is that this river cruise that he's put in quotes is a slave trading ship that is
Yeah.
taking Africans to Europe to sell them as part of the slave trade. And he's saying that the conditions on board the slave ship are not ideal.
I'm not sure what to say. He's probably right. I unless he's talk. I mean, the other more generous reading is he's making a point about the modern the modern. I can't think of a generous reading, actually.
Yeah, I think this is a good exercise in organic unity, because he mentions the comedy gigs at Mate and then makes a joke that is just on par for the level of comedy at Mate. So,
Hey, yeah, that would go down very well at an open mic.
yeah.
Also, was it him that said that I butcher language, or you added that as well? Did you?
No, that was Brian who said that in the previous message.
I know, but you also said while you read the message out,
Oh,
which
no,
Ollie
no, no.
calls M8.
I put that in there. Is it actually M8?
Well,
I just always assumed it was Mate.
Well, the owner told me it was, because it stands for Mohican 8. I'm trying to work out why. Well, because the owner's got a Mohican, and 8 is a number.
Honestly, it took me a second to figure out whether or not you were saying the hairstyle, the Mohican, or the Mohawk, or if you were just really pretentiously pronouncing Mexican. That's legit. I really didn't know. But with that, should we go ahead and get into the news?
Yeah, okay, let's do the news. Bobby, what's in the news this week? It's big news for news this week in news.
It is big news for news, because we've got typhoon number 19, or Typhoon Hagibis, is actually about to strike. It's about to make land in Tokyo, Chiba area as we speak. I'm very far from Tokyo, and I've got crazy strong wind outside the house right now.
I got strong wind as well. Oh, you're talking about the typhoon.
Yeah, the typhoon wind. And there's been a bunch of related controversies in terms of how the Japanese media and how the people in Japan right now are preparing and dealing with the typhoon. Did you see the rugby one?
Yeah, well, we talked about it on rugby. Rugby. We love rugby.
We love rugby. Yeah. Yeah, because the All Blacks fans in particular are very upset that they came in to see the All Blacks play Japan, and the games, when they don't get postponed, they get canceled due to weather. It's the first time in a Rugby World Cup that a game has ever been canceled due to weather, and those games are just considered draws. And since they're already pretty far along in the tournament, again, we don't want to say anything that demonstrates that we have a knowledge of rugby, because we save all of that for our other podcast, Rugby. Oh, we love rugby.
Yeah.
But I guess that means that they take a draw where they expect that they could have won, but they're really disappointed that they don't get to see their rugby games, which some people are saying is kind of inconsiderate, because this might kill people.
Well, so can rugby. Yeah. Well, so I mean, typhoons are bad, and in Japan they can get particularly bad, and I remember once there being a typhoon coming and people somewhat, in my view, overreacting, like buying too many supplies than they might necessarily have needed. Is there a lot of panic going on at the moment?
Well, yeah, I think there is a lot of, I don't know if it's overreacting, because I don't know what's going to happen. If you watch the Japanese media, then it makes it look like it's going to be the end of the world. They've put on all these like videos of what happens to buildings or cars or trucks or bicycles in similar wind conditions, where they've like replicated the wind conditions, and they show like houses being torn apart. And they've done all this stuff, like, when a wet newspaper gets picked up by wind of a certain level, it like breaks windows, and what happens when abandoned umbrellas go flying around. And they're showing all of these kind of like doomsday images on TV, which everybody I think is taking pretty seriously. But you never really know. I mean, we'll probably know by the time this podcast goes up, so apologies for anything that sounds insensitive to all of the people who've lost their lives.
They won't be listening, will they?
No. But
Okay.
one of the news items that we wanted to talk about was let's see here. Typhoon warning from NHK to all foreigners causes controversy online. So
the actual
NHK,
news is the news. The news has become the news.
NHK
Who
News
guards the guards?
Sent out a tweet to Gaikokujin no minasan e, which is to all the foreigners here. And there's this big push behind Yasashi Nihongo, easy Japanese, easy to understand Japanese. And so to make the typhoon preparedness information more readily available to all foreigners, what they did was they sent out a message entirely in hiragana. And as you
hiragana being one of the three Japanese writing systems, the one that
the
is
most basic.
It's associated with children. It's what children learn first.
And as expected, it caused a lot of controversy among Japanese people. No, not Japanese people, foreigners in Japan. Do you have?
What were they were upset because they said, "Hey, you don't need to write it in this basic alphabet. I'm a big boy. I've learnt Japanese. I can read the actual news." To which people responding, "Do that then."
right. Like the idea that there were not tweets also geared towards Japanese people who comprehend Japanese that involve like kanji and things like that.
And there were loads of them.
I see,
but like NHK's. Well, this is the way that I see it, right?
Yeah.
There's a Twitter user called Alice, who I think is friends with Michaela, who was one of the top comments in response to this, and she said, "The thing is, foreign people can just use an online dictionary like Imiwa. So it doesn't matter if you use kanji because we can always look it up." And that's generally true, right? That annoyed me when I'd receive an email all in hiragana or all in katakana I've had once. I think you've had that as well, haven't you?
If you're using any kind of translation software, then not including any kanji and just writing out all in hiragana makes it very, very impossible to parse for a translation server. So I get that side of it. I have received emails written all in hiragana. I have received emails written all in katakana. And without kanji that show you where to parse them, it's just this big, overwhelming block of text that like attacks your eyes. And when I've received them from people that I know my Japanese level, I do feel kind of condescended to or pandered to or insulted. However, my overall take on this is that part of the outrage is from these foreigners who go, we can read kanji, we can handle kanji, and you've lumped all foreigners, you've stereotyped all foreigners as these people who can only read hiragana because we're children in your eyes. But the people who are saying that are forgetting that there are all of these other foreigners who speak other languages and foreigners at all levels. And so the outrage also is based on this idea that all foreigners are under the same category that you think you're in.
Yeah, well, also, so first thing in response to Alice's point, which is, well, you can just put it through a dictionary. You can, but how would you know that's the right tweet to do so, right? Like, no one has time to put every single NHK tweet through Google Translate. So it's absolutely fair play for NHK to say, hey, this tweet's important. Foreigners read this one. And also, and then some people were like, well, couldn't you just put it in English or put it in Korean? It's like, well, no, there's people in Japan from hundreds of countries who can't necessarily read the English or the Korean or the Chinese. I think maybe it's a bad optics thing to say "gai kokujin no minasae." They could have just said, "juyo yasashi nihongo version" or something. Like, that might have been slightly better optics.
So the Rising Wasabi is this like the Japanese Onion style newspaper that publishes all of these parody news articles about Japan, and the last couple have just been like they haven't even parodied them because they're just real news that seems like parody. So one of them was about this, NHK tweets warning to foreigners in all hiragana. And it's funny because it's something that happens to us in our daily lives when Japanese people assume that we can't handle Japanese. But the other one that came right on the heels of it was there's a Japanese
Was it
media
the
report.
Nobel?
Yeah. Kyodo Tsushin, the news
Yeah,
agency Kyodo
it's
Tsushin
so funny,
reports
isn't it?
that Noberu Bungaku Shou wa Gaikokujin ni is the headline, which means the Nobel Prize in Literature goes to foreigners.
Goes to a foreigner.
Yeah.
Which is basically their way of saying it wasn't Murakami this year.
Yeah. We didn't get it this time.
It's so funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, it reminds me of when I did the all Japanese show at the Edinburgh Festival 2 years ago. We did a one-off show all in Japanese, and Saku Yanagawa kind of promoted it, and we managed to get quite a big crowd.
Yeah.
And I emceed it, and I said it's so nice to see so many foreigners here in one place. And like the Japanese bloke on the front row turned around and like obviously looked back at me as if to go, like, I only see a couple of white people.
Right.
And I was like, hey man, from my perspective, this is my country right now. You're a foreigner. And it seems like such a trite observation, but that is like really progressive comedy for a Japanese audience. They just don't get that.
It's so progressive that nobody would understand it.
Yeah, well, I got a laugh when I told them they had to laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, well, I don't know, man. It's like the internet's just full of people showing off that they speak good Japanese, and that's not limited to this podcast.
Nope.
Where we will often speak some Japanese without translation because we're arrogant. Well, to our dear listenership, including Brian, was it Matthias?
Yes. Don't forget Jackie, who's still waiting on her Korean information.
Oh, right, okay, and Jackie as well. We know that your Japanese is shit, all right? So next time there's any kind of warning, right, trust us, who does speak Japanese. We will translate any emergency news on this podcast within our release schedule.
I feel like I'm starting to agree with Brian, who accused you of butchering your own language.
What did I just do wrong?
I think you just said who does. Us, you said like us who does.
Yeah, like us who does.
I just want to go on the record as saying I am no longer trying to alienate the Bryans.
But so now this is an us versus them situation, and you're with the Bryans.
I think we can play good cop, bad cop with the Bryans. Like I'll try to be their friend and reward them for their participation in the show, and you can.
And I'll shoot them because I presume they're black.
Yeah.
We have any more on the typhoon? I guess until the typhoon comes. There's,
let's go ahead and to avoid putting our feet in our mouths because the typhoon is coming right now. Let's go ahead and talk about the next news item, which is from the BBC. So anytime that you see a Japanese-focused story picked up in the Western media, you can be sure it's about some crazy shit.
Oh, well, particularly the BBC, because the reporter that does it for the BBC does seem to think. Well, I mean, I guess he knows his readership. Anything crazy Japan, anything where people are perverted or not having sex. I mean, the BBC is obsessed with the idea that Japan isn't having sex.
Yeah.
It makes no sense at all. They obviously heard my news of 4 years of a sexist Japan experience. What story is this in particular? It's probably about someone being. Oh, it's the guy. Oh yeah, exactly. Fits the mold.
Yeah.
A weirdo.
Stalker found Japanese singer through reflection in her eyes. So this has all the elements that the BBC, as a representative of the Western media, loves about crazy Japan news. Otaku-poi stalkers, like really kind of like subculture, geeky, nerdy, dangerous people. It has sexual assaults, which is always great for news. And then it has Japanese idols. So it's A Japanese man accused of stalking and sexually assaulting a young pop star told police he located her through the reflection in her eyes in a picture, according to local media reports. Oh, and it has abusive technology as well, which is another great.
It's
Great
pushing all
little
the buttons, isn't
touchstone.
it?
Yep.
So the story is, this idol, an idol is like a singer in a band,
Like
in
a pop star,
band.
like a pop star who is kind of like a girl next door and doesn't have to necessarily be good at singing or dancing.
Right. Okay. So they that section of the talent industry has the same rules for foreigners. Foreigners big on TV as well. You just got to look great.
Yeah.
No, not a fan of that little joke, Bobby.
No, I was reading the article and not actually listening.
Great.
Sorry. It's
what a
okay.
great
It's okay. Nobody playing the podcast is listening either. So.
oh, we've gone from that. Now we know we do have listeners. We've gone from not that no one's listening, but people are listening, but it's in the background.
They're not paying attention.
Okay.
Hold on. Let me get everybody's attention real quick. Brian. Okay, now that now that they're back.
Hey, Brian. Stop what you're doing, Brian.
Now that they're back. So this is the man. He studied a selfie that she'd posted online, and he identified a train station sign reflected, and then he waited outside that station until she showed up. So he figured out that was a station that she used regularly, and then he showed up at the station, waited until he found her, and then followed her to her home, and sexually assaulted her. Which I was talking to somebody who works in the news in Japan the other day, because they're reporting this in Japan as well, and they said they use the term waisetsu koi, which is there's a difference between sexual assault and rape. So if they use the term gokan or something like that, then you could be clear that it was rape. But this, because they call it waisetsu koi, it was probably like grabbing her or molesting her or feeling her up. And that was as far as it went.
Right. Which is still, Bobby, very bad.
It's still very, very bad. Yeah.
So why don't we focus more on the novel side of the story, which is that he used this picture rather than the sexual assault side of the story, because I've got nothing good to say about the way that Japan deals with sexual assault. I will, in a rare moment of me being serious and candid, my ex-girlfriend. So yes, that little joke earlier that I didn't have sex was a lie. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I had a Japanese girlfriend. Bobby, congratulate me.
Congratulations.
Thank you. She wouldn't it have been good if she was black as well? You're
just ticking off all the bingo categories, right? Again, you're the most diverse white dude in all of podcasting.
Thank you. She very briefly worked at a gym, at a fitness gym, as a personal trainer.
Mm-hmm.
And there were 4 girls that worked there, and all 4 of them had stories about the boss who was being creepy. And he would say, part of our training style is you've got to be really hands-on, make sure you're pulling your guests, pulling our clients' shoulders back to help with their form, whatever. And he, full-on was grabbing her ass. And she said, that's not all right, is it? I said, no. That's absolutely not cool. If you don't want that to happen, tell him not to. She went, I can't tell him not to. And anyway, it got worse. And he would, hands would linger and stuff. And she said, what should I do? And I said, well, either you quit, but really, what he's doing is he's breaking the law. So if you want to go to the police, you should. If this makes you feel bad. And she said, I'm too scared to go. So I went myself. And I turned up to the police station. I said, I'd like to know, I'd like some information about how you would report sexual harassment. And they said, were you sexually harassed?
You went on your own without her?
Yeah, she was too scared to even go into the police station. So but she went, if there's a number I can call, I'll call. And so I just went to the police station, just asked. I was like, I'd like to know if there's any number I can call to talk about sexual harassment. And the police officer laughed. They were like, you were sexually harassed? And I was like, no, I'm speaking on behalf of my girlfriend. She's been sexually harassed at work, and she'd like to speak to someone about it, but she's too nervous to come into a police station to speak to bigoted old men like you, who laugh at the idea that a man might have been sexually harassed. I didn't say that, obviously. And like they had a chat amongst themselves.
They do have a real like a sensitivity issue.
Oh, for sure. And he just couldn't provide me with anything. He said the only advice he gave, he said could she try asking the boss to stop? And I was like, you are not helpful.
Yeah.
In the end, we Googled something and she called, but nothing came of it. I think she quit the job as soon as she could. So
yeah.
I've got no time at all for talking about.
Well, it's sad to me that you said like let focus on the novel aspect of it, because sexual harassment, sexual assault is not novel at all here, or anywhere really.
Well, that's what I mean. Like,
yeah.
let's not dwell on this part too much. Let's start on the funny part. He used a picture.
Well, so that also gets frustrating, because a large part of the reaction to this news has been like, well, maybe will be a wake-up call for young women who are obsessed with putting their photos online because your personal information can be found out about it.
Yes, finally, yes. No, absolutely. My instinct too was to try and find a way to blame the victim, and I'm glad you found the angle.
Don't put that angle on me, okay? not my angle. This is something that especially some Japanese commenters and also some English language commenters have said, like, women have an obsession with, getting validation online, which, number one, this is not just a woman. This is a pop star who, like, part of her business is gaining admiration and followers online. And then you blame so the Twitter thread that I saw was a guy saying, it should be the woman's responsibility to protect themselves. If you put your personal information out there, the wrong people will see it and find it. And they were reacting
protect themselves against what?
So what they were saying is, you make it sound like all men are these crazy stalkers, but really it's only a crazy few out there. And if they find your personal information, you got to worry about that. And which kind of seems like it negates their argument to me, because if you're saying that not all men are dangerous and that there are only a few crazy ones out there, then again, why are you blaming the person who was harassed by a minority crazy person? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you kind of preaching to the choir here, but what's been the Japanese media's main take on this? Are they saying idols need more protection? Are they saying, are they somehow, like, whenever I've seen stuff like this before, there's always been some kind of, well, if they weren't so beautiful, if they didn't make men fall in love with them so much, men wouldn't go to these crazy lengths. I've seen that hot take a couple of times.
I think there have been a handful of incidences since like 2016. There was a singer was stabbed. There was someone who had her address leaked to two obsessive fans who showed up at her house and assaulted her. And then this one, and the way that the media has handled them afterwards has been horrendous enough to get backlash. And so I think, like, the woman who was stabbed is suing the government for not doing enough to protect her. The one earlier this year, Yamaguchi Maho, she brought down a lot of heat on her management agency for not doing enough to protect her and for creating this culture that allows men, including crazy men, to think that it's their right to have access to these women. But it also, I mean, the main focus in the Japanese media has been in how he used the photos, how he used her social media to track her down. Even on one of the shows that I work with, they took a reporter out to a local station and took pictures of her that you could see Tenjin train station sign in her iris.
So what was that news proving? That news item seems like it's victim blaming.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Japan tends to walk a fine line between saying, like, you should do things to avoid being victimized, but I don't necessarily feel like it says it was her fault for posting that picture. There is a large focus on prevention in terms of any kind of crime. Like we talked about in the Aori Unten episode that we did about, like, the the response to it is everybody needs to get dash cams. Everybody needs to get drive recorders to prevent, to prevent or to protect yourself in cases of incidences of road rage. And like the scams, the ore sagi, or like the bank furikomi sagi, where people call up elderly people and talk them into sending them money by bank transfer. It's all focused on like what you can do to be aware of and prevent it. And I rarely see anything, especially in terms of sexual assault, aimed at educating Japanese men not to sexually assault, or anything in terms of like analyzing and looking into why the idol culture or the culture around gender relations makes men feel entitled to do whatever they want.
Yeah, well, on the note of men being entitled, I think one way, of course, in which these idols can make sure that they aren't stalked by foreign men is to make sure that they only stand in front of train signs which are written in kanji.
I could feel you looking at the clock and seeing how long we've gone over and going, I need to end this on something funny. I need to end this on something funny.
Yeah, was that funny enough?
Yeah, let's call it there.
Thanks, Brian, for sticking through to the end.
Yeah, and thank you everybody for listening. We do actually sincerely appreciate your listenership, and if you want to get in touch with us, you can send us a message at www.japanbyrivercruise.com, where you can find our messaging box.
But we'd rather you didn't, because we do reluctantly read every message on air.
Yes.
Also, if you're interested in sending us a message about rugby, where do they go, Bobby?
They go to rugby, oh, we love rugby.com with 3 A's.
And if you want to subscribe to this podcast, wherever you're listening to it, probably has a subscribe button. That might be written in Japanese. What would be the Japanese word, Bobby?
Toroku.
Oh, they won't be able to read that.